And good day, everyone. So, this will be our first lesson for our practical research 2. And our lesson for today is about quantitative research. But before that, I would like to make a class agreement since I have told you last week, that I will still push through to our research activity, and it will be unfair if I will require the modular, since most of some of you chose modular because of technical reasons or internet connection reasons. So I'm going to give a class agreement so that it will be fair for everyone. So for modular, you are not required to be part of the research activity. Instead, you need to finish all the required modules for our subjects, and that will be 14 modules in all. So I think it will be equally difficult, especially these modules are very tasky. Medyo marami siyang lessons. But I believe it is equally difficult compared to online na they need to finish 5 chapters of the research. So how can it be equally difficult? Because they need to online researchers need to draft their own research and collect data. So there will be also a discussion for statistics. I think you're already done with your statistics with Mr. Magaja, but I will ask a favor to Mr. Magaja to review you the inferential statistics, since it will be needed for our subject, for our computation here in our practical research too. So, but if you want, but still, if you want to be part of the research team, just let me know so I can put you in our group. So far, as far as I know, I did not include any modular student in any of the group. So if you are in modular mode and your name is included in one of the groups, so please let me know para tanggalin ko. But if you want to be part of the research activity, I will be glad to welcome you to our research groups. But always remember na pinapili ko po kayo. Pinapili ko po kayo, especially sa modular, na binigyan ko po kayo ng free will to choose kung ano yung gagawin ninyo. You will stick to purely modular, or gagawin natin tong research. So I hope wala tayong maging complain sa dulo, kasi pagdating sa kalagitnaan, pag nag-start na tayo, I will not allow anyone to change their mode. So kung bawa modular ka, nahirapan ka kasi napakadami ng module. Gusto mo mag-research na lang. So hindi na po ako papayag kasi unfair na siya. Kasi like, kapag start na sila, tapos bigla ka na lang papasok. So please make your decision until, I think, until this first meeting ends. So sana po ma-inform po ako. For our online students, you need to choose whether you want to do the 5 chapters of our research, or you want to do the same with the modular. Na may 14 modules kayo sa sagutan. So I will ask you to choose your own um, learning mode. Kasi ayoko namang pilitin kayong tapusin yung chapters 1 to 5 pero ayaw nyo pala talaga, or hindi pala talaga kaya ng inyong sitwasyon. So please let me know kung halimbawa you are included in a group, but you just want to do the modular or the modules. So sabihan niyo po ako. So remember everyone that I gave you the freedom to choose your own learning mode. So please inform niyo po ako today kung ano po yung mapipili ninyo, kasi when we when we started, o pag nagsimula na tayo, when we start this research, wala na pong atrasan. So tuloy-tuloy na tayo. Hindi pwedeng nasa kalagitnaan, nahirapan yung group nyo, then you will ask me to change to modular. Hindi na po ako papayag kasi yan na nabanggit ko kanina, that will be unfair. Kasi kung papayag ako sa isa, papayag dapat ako sa lahat. So timbangin nyo na yung damdamin ninyo kung talaga bang ano yung mas gusto ninyo. Oops. So I'm showing you now the groups for trustworthy. So please look for your names. Kung alam ko tinanggal ko na dito si Valveran, bakit nandyan pa din? Parang hindi yan. So si ano po, si I know I edited this PowerPoint but as you can see na nandito pa rin yung pangalan ni Valveran tsaka ni Escocia which they are included in modular. So please for Valveran, tinanggal ko na po yung pangalan mo dyan. Siguro hindi lang na save. And Escocia, I remove your name also there sa group 5. And I transferred Borromeo to group 5. So Borromeo, group 5 ka po. Group 5. So kung meron pa po ditong modular sa mga nakalista dyan, so again, si Valveran and si Escocia po are not included in group 1 and group 5. Tinanggal ko na po sila dyan kasi sila ay modular. So, oops, kukulangin pala yung group 1. Sige, yung group 1, update ko kayo kung sino yung dagdag na member ninyo. So, si Borromeo will be transferred to group 5 and as much as possible, you need to stick to your groups kasi I chose your group based on a online app. So wala po kung personal na pagpili ng inyong grupo. And kilala niyo naman ako as much as possible. I want you to respect my decision in groupings. So pag hindi niyo ko sinunod, magkakaproblema tayo. Especially dun sa mga bago, ganun po talaga ako kapag binuo ko yung grupo at hindi nyo nag-away-away kayo, magkakaproblema kayong lahat. So please, um, ang tawag dito, pakiingatan po yung ating mga groups na sana until the end ay group pa din kayo. So until the end, sana lahat ng group members ay tumulong kasi kilala niyo ako, hindi ako nagbibigay ng grade sa hindi tumutulong. Hindi rin po ako papayag na mag-aambag kayo kasi wala naman po tayong ipiprint. Hindi niyo pwede sabihin mag-aambag na lang kayo. So wala po kayo ipiprint. Ang kailangan ko po ay effort. Effort at kailangan ko ng inyong outputs. So please, um, collaborate and contribute to your respective groups. Especially po dun sa mga bago, um, sorry, sa lahat ng mga old students, please welcome po paki-welcome po natin yung ating mga new students dito. So, ayoko na silang isa-isahin. Please make them feel that they are welcome to our school. At syempre, nag-a-adjust sila sa ating educational system sa Jesus de la Peña National High School, Senior High School Department. So please help them and also um, use this activity to bond with them. Sana maging bonding nyo to instead na maging reason para mag-away-away kayo. So this will be the groups and these persons are opt to choose individual. So sila yung matatapang na nag-individual. So I hope wala nang magbabago dito sa apat na to, si Salazar, Sohorda, Moreno, tsaka si Dolosa. So kung biglang nagbago yung isip nyo, baguhin nyo na ngayon na until today. Kasi pag nag-start na tayo, paninindigan nyo na yung individual na yan. So mag-isipan na po. Mag-isipan. For honest, this will be your group. Ang alam ko sa honest, wala akong naging problem. Lahat ng nandito ay puro voluntarily nagpadagdag sa groups. So, si Padre I included Padre sa group 3 kasi sa listahan, I mean, kasi sabi niya mag-online na lang siya. So I included him in the group. Pero please let me know kung gaya na nabanggit ko kanina, please let me know kung online kayo, anong gusto niyo? Research ba pa rin ba or you just want to answer the modules? So, please inform niyo ako today. So, meron lang tayong dalawang na matatapang na nag-individual sa honest. Yan ay si Go at si Soriano. I think si Soriano ay new student. Kasi ngayon ko lang narinig yung pangalan niya. So, welcome to um, Sus de la Peña National High School. At sana kung seryoso na kayong dalawa, Go and Soriano, sa paggawa nito ng individual, please let me know para alam ko na hindi na kayo magbabago ng isip. So let's start. So our research for this semester will be quantitative research. So malaki yung difference nito sa ginawa natin last semester. I don't know if the new students experience to have their research in their respective schools, but last semester I I was their research teacher in practical research one, and I asked them to at least finish the 5 chapters. Yun nga lang, during our last parts of the research, yun nga, na-cancel yung klase. Yun, I think some of them already done with the interviews and made their interpretations with their research or with their interviews. So yun, sayang hindi namin na i-present. Yung iba tontuwa kasi hindi sila nakagawa pero natapos nila kasi nga na-cancel yung klase. Yung mga nasermonan ko kasi hindi hindi gumagawa. So I hope wala tayong ganong moment dito na online na tayo, nagsisermonan pa tayo. So what is the quantitative research? Quantitative research is a research design that uses numbers of numbers in stating generalizations about a given problem or inquiry. These numbers are results of objective scales of measurements of the units of analysis called variables. So, mamaya malalaman natin yung variables na yan. Furthermore, research findings are subjected to statistical treatment to determine significant relationships and differences between variables, the results of which are the basis of for generalization about the problem. So let's make it easier. So sa quantitative research, what we need to know, what we need to collect are the responses in number form. Hindi gaya nung um, qualitative research, di ba marami tayong mga research design gaya ng phenomenology, historical, ethnography, so kung ano man yung mga ginawa nyo last time. So most of them hindi kailangan ng variables, hindi kailangan ng statistical treatment. Kaya nung nabanggit ko kanina, 'di ba, sabi ko hingi tayo ng tulong kay Sir Magadja. Although I can teach you na yung mga gagamitin nating statistical treatment, yun nga lang I'm not qualified to do that kasi syempre hindi ako baka hindi magkamali ako. So pag nagkamali ako, magkakamali tayong lahat. So para magpaturo tayo doon sa mas nakakaalam. So, balikan natin. So, nung first semester, yung mga ginawa nating research is more on um, qualitative, more on interviews, more on archival data, or more on facts. So, yun yung sinusuri natin. Kasi what we need to know is the quality. Kumbaga sabi ko sa inyo noong nakaraan, kung oo, bakit? Kung sinabi niyang hindi maganda, bakit? Dito sa quantitative research, hindi natin aalamin yung bakit talaga. Aalamin natin kung oo, ilan sila, gaano sila kadami. Kung marami sila, anong ibig sabihin nito? Kung sumagot silang hindi, anong ibig sabihin ng hindi? Kung maraming sumagot na hindi. Hindi na natin aalamin individually bakit hindi ang sagot nila. Unlike last time, nag-interview kayo, pag sinabi nilang hindi, bakit po? So, susuriin natin yung pagkakaiba-iba ng mga hindi ng mga respondents. Unlike dito sa quantitative research, what we need is the uses of numbers in stating generalization. So, kung alam niyo halimbawa, yung latest research sa ating president, yung sa Pulse Asia survey, I think Pulse Asia yun, stating that the net satisfaction rating of our president is 92%, the highest satisfaction rating in this pandemic phenomenon sa lahat ng bansa sa mundo. So, according yun sa research sa 1,000 respondents. So, kung sumagot silang satisfied, bibilangin lang yung kung ilan yung satisfied. Hindi natatanungin kung bakit. Hindi natatanungin kung yung dissatisfied na 8%, bakit sila dissatisfied. So, hindi na yun aalamin. Aalamin lang yung satisfied tsaka not satisfied. So, ano lang, um, in layman's term, ganun ko lang siya papaliwanag sa inyo para mas madali tayong makausap. So, characteristics, methods are or procedures of data gathering includes, I'm sorry, um, include items like age, gender, educational status, among others that call measurable characteristics of the population. So these are what we call demographic data. So in qualitative research, we also include that to give impressions. But in quantitative research, that can be used as variable. That can be used also as way also to give impression, but in statistical way. So sabi dito, among others that call for measurable characteristic. Dapat measurable, meaning you can count, you can compute. So not just you can explain, but you can compute also. Standardized instrument guide data collection, thus ensuring the accuracy, reliability, and validity of data. So unlike in the first research that we rely on theories, we rely on concepts of different theorists, we will use the standardized instruments for data collection. So later, siguro pag nandun na tayo sa kalagitnaan during research instrument, I will help you to find your own standardized instrument. So as much as possible, hindi tayo gagawa ng atin. Kasi pag gumawa tayo ng atin, there will be series of validations na magko-consume ng time. But if we have no choice. For example, there will be no available standardized instrument. So magde-devise talaga tayo ng sarili natin. So later na 'yon. Siguro sa mga susunod na panahon. Figures, tables, and or graphs showcase summarized data collected in order to show trends, relationships, or differences among variables. The charts and tables allow you to see the evidence collected. So unlike in qualitative research, last time, kung naalala nyo, tinuruan ko kayo paano gumawa ng codes sa mga respondents at paano gamitin yung kanilang mga sagot, how to use their answers in chapter 4, 'di ba? Paano sila ilalagay. So you need to quote most of the statements that create impression, then generalize. I-generalize mo yung mga sinabi ng mga respondents. Unlike here in quantitative research, data are represented using figures, tables, and graphs. So, halimbawa, sumagot oo, graph dyan. Kung, kung halimbawa, ang inobserbahan ay growth ng isang na klase, so nandyan yung scores, nandito yung scores, nandito yung scores, nandito yung scores. So, um, mas organized siya kasi meron siyang mga organizers na ginamit. Unlike in qualitative research, naka-paragraph yung presentation ng data. So, kailangan mo talaga siyang basahin. Unlike in quantitative research, you can understand the chapter 4 by just mere looking at the table. Siguro, palalimin mo na lang with the explanation below. Number 4, a large population yields more reliable data, but principles of random sampling must be strictly followed to prevent research bias. So, if you remember in our um, research last semester, I told you that in qualitative research, you cannot include a huge number of population or sample respondents kasi mahirap siya gawin dahil the the main data collection procedure will be interview pagdating sa qualitative and participant observation. Pero pagdating dito sa quantitative, hindi puwedeng konti, kailangan madami. Madami means it will be enough to represent the population of the study. So, halimbawa, bigyan ko na kayo ng konting idea. The acceptable population will be 50% plus 1. So kung halimbawa 1,000 yan, ang 50% niya ay 500 plus 1. So 501 ang kailangang respondents. So ganun po. Ganun siya ka-define. Dapat para maging reliable, large number of population yung kukunin mo. But ang mahalaga dito sa quantitative is the manner of choosing your respondents. Kung naalala nyo din, last time, di ba, pinaliwanag ko din yan. We have different um, sampling techniques. Merong random, merong systematic, merong snowball, meron pang multi-level, cluster, etc. Pinaliwanag ko yung last time, but in uulitin natin siya for this semester for the sake na maalala ninyong lahat kung ano yung dapat ninyong gamitin. Number 5, quantitative methods can be repeated to verify findings in another setting, thus reinforcing validity of findings. So, ang maganda sa quantitative, you can replicate the study in other situation. So, pwede mo siyang ulitin sa ibang sitwasyon. Unlike in qualitative, since this is more generic or more of having general impression. So hindi mo na minsan kailangan siyang ulitin in another setting kasi sometimes included na siya dun sa research lahat ng scenario. So strengths and weaknesses. So strengths muna. Strength quantitative research design is the most reliable and valid way of concluding results giving way to a new hypothesis or disproving it. So in academic work, quantitative research is more reliable compared to qualitative because of the number of respondents, because of the manner of selection, and the presentation of data. Pero syempre, we cannot disregard the qualitative. Mahalaga pa din yun. Weakness, quantitative research can be costly. Costly kasi, um, kung susunod talaga tayo sa manner ng paggawa nito, that will include the validators. For example, I'm a master's degree student. I need to pay for a validator kasi hindi libre yon. I need to pay for um, editor. I need to pay for grammarian. I need to pay for statistician. So medyo magastos. So difficult kasi nga may computation, may statistical treatment, time consuming because of most of the researchers are non-mathematicians. So that will be a problem kasi in quantitative research, we need to incorporate statistical treatment. So kung hindi ka marunong, you need to seek help from a statistician. Actually, kahit marunong ka, if you're studying in master's degree school, you need to get a statistician kasi kumbaga hindi ka credible pag kahit marunong ka, you are not credible. But here in our practical research too, syempre hindi ko kayo pagagawin ng ganun. So kayo po yung magko-compute or siguro maghahanap tayo ng app ng pwede nating maging aid para maging madali yung ating computation. So aalamin natin yan kay Sir Raymond. Excuse me. Second, quantitative experiments filter out external factors if properly designed and so the results gained can be seen as real and unbiased. Quantitative experiments are useful for testing the results gained by the series of qualitative experiments, leading to a final answer and a narrowing down of possible directions to follow. So, kung in short, itong strengths ng quantitative research is unbiased. Napaka-unbiased niya kasi Um, we rely on the quantity of the responses. So kung mas maraming nagsabi, mas reliable. So, maraming nag-oo. So, since the population you get is the representation of the whole population, ano siya, magpapakita siya ng response ng kabuuan. So, unlike in qualitative, minsan ang respondents 5 lang, 10 lang, ang ire-represent niya ay malaki. Dahil nga dun sa manner of data collection, hindi siya pwedeng ganun kadami. So, hindi siya um, kasing unbiased ng quantitative. So, used for testing the results gained by a series of qualitative experiments. So, kung nagagawin kayo sa mga hospital, pag kayo ay nagpapa-check up, so they use also quantitative research to give you the findings. Pero syempre, ano na yan, computer generated na yan, yung mga yan. So, pero yung ginagawa ng computer, that's the same with the research. So, ginagamit niya yung mga qualitative data, sabihin ng qualitative data, things that cannot be computed to give impression, tapos sa kanya, i-compute. So, witness, quantitative studies require extensive statistical treatment requiring stringent standards more so with confirmation of results. When ambiguities in some findings surface, the testing and refinement of design call for another investment in time and resources to polish the results. So, ang mahirap lang din sa qualitative o quantitative, it require extensive statistical treatment. That's why you need to get a statistician if we follow the protocol. Pero syempre, mahal 'yon. So I will just ask you to compute just to let you know how to do it. Pero pagdating sa academe, they they ask us to get a statistician kasi nga mahirap magkamali. Once na nagkamali ka, you need to repeat everything. Unlike in qualitative, pwedeng ikaw na yung mag-interpret. Basta kailangan lang naiintindihan mo ng mabuti yung theory para may paliwanag mo siya. So sa quantitative, hindi pwede yun. Kasi pag nagkamali, gaya dito, when ambiguities in some finding surface, retesting and refinement of the design call for another investment. So, maaaring magkaroon ng retesting. Nangyari yan nung nakaraang taon na yung yung nag-present ng research, dinoktor niya yung data. Dinoktor niya yung data, then the panel observed that the data is very out of this world. Parang, ang sabi nila, saan niyo nakuha to? How did you do the study? How did you conduct your survey? Who validated your research questions? Or who validated your research instrument? So, dahil mali yung kanilang sagot and they cannot explain na dinoktor lang talaga nila yung data, the panel asked them to do everything from scratch. Talagang scrap lahat, then they need to start new research or um, I think they just refine the chapters 1, 2, and 3. Tapos yung chapter 4 and 5, ulit talaga lahat. So yun yung mahirap dito sa quantitative. So kailangan maging tapat, maging honest tayo dun sa data, and also we need to be careful in um, our manner of doing the research kasi manner of presenting your data kasi minsan hindi syempre sa kagustuhan yung matapos dodoktorin nyo na so mabubuko din kayo. Third, because of a bigger number of the sample, the results of our generalization are more reliable and valid. So, explain ko na yun kanina. Quantitative methods also tend to turn out only proof or unproved results, leaving little room for certainty or gray areas. So, minsan may mga gray areas yung quantitative research that lead to some questions. At most of the questions are bakit? Bakit? Diba, for example, we will just use the example, the Pulse Asia survey, di ba? Nung lumabas, President Duterte has positive 92 net satisfaction rating. Sabi ng net satisfaction rating, na-less na lahat yon. Ang taas pa din, na-less na lahat ng factors, pero 92% pa din siya. So naging tanong mga tao, bakit? Bakit siya 92%? Eh, ganito na ngayon nangyayari. Hindi ko to personal opinion, nabasa ko lang to. Bakit, ano, bakit 92%? Paano pinili yung respondents? Sino ba nagsagot ng mga yan? So, ganun yung nagiging gray area na dahil nga um, yung qualitative research does not explain the reason behind the answers of the respondents, nagkakaroon siya ng gray area. Bakit? That's why we need to be reliable in getting your sample. Kasi nagiging tanong dyan, sino may sample? Baka naman mga DTS yung mga yan. Kaya pag negative naman yun, mas siguro yung mga sample, mga dilawan yan. So laging may question sa ano sa sampling. So dapat wala tayong maging ganun pagdating sa presentation of data kasi laging may room for for gray area dun sa quantitative research that we need to fill. We need to fill in para as much as possible um, there will be no questions in the integrity of the researcher. Mahirap pag integrity na yung na-question sa inyo. So, we will now proceed to directly to the module kasi gusto ko ipaliwanag sa inyo yung ilang mga concepts regarding our research. So, didirekta na tayo dun sa module. So, we will start in module 3. So, in module 3, quarter 1, module 3, kinds of variables and their usage. So para ma-draft natin yung title, we need to understand first the variables. So ano ba itong mga variables na to? Um, so variable came from the Latin word variabilis, which means vary. Variable is defined as anything that has a quantity or quality that varies. Variables are among fundamental concepts of research together with measurement, validity, reliability, cause, and effect and theory. Bernard, 1994, cited in Prieto et al. Defines a variable as something that can take more than one value, and value can be words or numbers. Based on so huwag na yan. So here are some examples of variables such as age, sex, gender, education, income, marital status, and occupation. So variables, ito yung mga binibilang natin o tinitignan natin sa survey o sa isang research. Um, Mahalaga yung variables kasi they represent data, they represent the information from the respondents. So meron tayong ilang mga nature of variables and data. Pero talaktawan natin yung pangatlo kasi hindi natin siya masyadong kailangan. So una yung nominal variable. So yung nominal variable represent categories that cannot be ordered in any particular way. Example dito ay yung biological sex gaya ng male, female, political affiliation, basketball fan affiliation, and etc. So in much simpler explanation, so tingnan natin yung example. Bawa full name. Yung full name, hindi nyo naman yung kayang bilangin kasi magkakaiba tayo ng pangalan. Although yung gender, pwede siyang bilangin, pero hindi siya magandang representation para sa para magkaroon ng number. So hindi mo pwedeng pagpalit-palitin yung gender ng mga respondents kasi babae yung number 1, lalaki yung number 2. So hindi mo siya pwedeng i-arrange ng highest to low ng highest to lowest kasi magpapalit din yung gender. So hindi pwede 'yon. So email address, so yung email address hindi mo din siya nabibilang kasi magkakaiba tayo ng email address. Ito is sa customer feedback. So yung unang Yung unang tanong, pwede siya kasi ano eh, may choices eh, less than 6 months, 6 months, 7 months. So dito, yung sa sumunod, what do you think about our mobile app? Ang sagot niya dito, qualitative data na. Kasi ano na eh, written in words, written in um, not written in words and not in numbers. So hindi siya nabibilang, hindi siya kayang i-categorize kasi hindi siya number. So, sir, kailangan ba namin ng nominal variable pagdating sa research? Kailangan nyo pa din kasi um, sa quantitative research, meron pa rin kayong mga qualitative meron pa rin kayong qualitative explanation dito sa sa chapter 4. So kailangan nyo pa din 'yan ng mga 'yan. Pero minsan may mga researcher ng quantitative na hindi na siya inilalagay. Next is ordinal variable. So kabaliktaran to ng nominal. So, sa ordinal variable, ordinal variables represent categories that can be ordered from greatest to smallest. So, like education level, yan. So, halimbawa, rank, grades, etc. So, meron tayong two types of ordinal variable. So, una yung value assignment. So, madali lang itong value assignment. Ganito lang siya. Halimbawa, very satisfied, satisfied, indifferent, dissatisfied, very dissatisfied. Tapos represented siya ng numbers. So dahil represented siya ng numbers, yung mga number na yon yung magsisilbing um, magiging quantitative data ninyo para sa research. So ordinal variable without numeric. So yan, very dissatisfied, satisfied, different, dissatisfied, very dissatisfied. Although wala siyang number, yun nga lang, medyo magiging tasky na bilangin pa yung sumagot. So bibilangin mo lang talaga yung quantity. Unlike dito sa nauna, pwede mong kunin yung average kasi may numbers na siya. Or yung mean. Kung napag-aralan nyo na yung mean sa statistics, madaling kunin yung mean dito kasi meron siyang representation. So it is characteristic, it is an extension of nominal data, it has no standardized interval scale. Yan, wala siyang interval. So mamaya papaliwanag natin yung paano yung interval. It establishes relative rank, measures qualitative traits, the mean median mode can be analyzed, and it has a rank and order. So madali lang naman yung median tsaka yung mode, yung meter score tsaka yung mode yung pinakamadaming sumagot. So wag na tong ayan yung example natin, Likert scale, interval scale, um, the differences between nominal and ordinal variable. The ordinal variable has an intrinsic order while the nominal variable do not have order. Kasi kung paano siya binigay sa inyo, pangalan at saka yung ano, yung gender, ganun siya talaga, magkasama talaga siya. So pag in-arrange mo ng alphabetical yung pangalan, hindi mo ma-arrange ng o maaring sumunod din yung gender pero hindi mo na siya pwedeng pagpalit-palitin. Similarities between nominal and ordinal variable. So they are both categorical variables. They are both in conclusive mean and mode. They are both visualized using bar charts and pie charts. So nakawan natin tong interval variable. Dito tayo sa ratio variable. So ratio variables have values that lie along an evenly dispersed range of numbers when there is absolute zero as opposed to the network which can have negative debt to income ratio level variable. So medyo mabigat yung explanation. So tingnan lang natin dito sa example. So sa example ng ratio variable ay yung multiple choice. Multiple choice. So dito sa multiple choice are mostly used for academic testing and ratio variables are sometimes used in this case. Especially for mathematics tests and word problems, we see examples of racial variables. So, ganyan siya. Survey questions. Yan. Organizations use this tool whenever they want to get feedback about products or service, perform market research, competitive analysis. They use ratio variables, to collect relevant data from respondents. To illustrate, yan pa yung makikita natin. So, maaaring gagawa din kayo ng ganito pagdating sa inyong instrument. So, meron tayong dalawang categories ng um, dalawang uri ng variable. Yun ay yung independent tsaka independent and dependent. Pero mas maganda dito lang tayo mag-focus sa independent tsaka dependent. So, medyo marami pa independent, dependent, intervening, or mediating, control, compounding variables. So, punta tayo sa independent. So, independent variables are those that probably cause, influence, or affect outcomes. They, excuse me, they are invariably called treatment, manipulated, antecedent, or predictor variables. An independent variable is exactly what it sounds like. It is variable that stands alone and isn't changed by other variables you are trying to measure. For example, excuse me, for example, someone's age might be an independent variable. So mamaya titignan natin yung relationship ng independent at dependent sa title. Other factors such as what they eat, how they go to school, how much television they watch aren't going to change a person's age. In fact, when you are looking for some kind of relationship between variables, you are trying to see if independent variable causes some kind of change in the other variables or dependent variables. So ito yung mga hindi madaling magbago pagdating sa study. Example, um, a scientist is testing the effect of light and dark on the behavior of moths by turning a light on and off. So ang ano dito, ang independent dito ay yung amount of light. Kasi yung amount of light, yan hindi naman siya nagbabago. What I mean, yung ilaw, ano siya yun pa din, pinapatay sindin mo lang siya. Ang nagbabago ay yung reaction ng moth. Bawa pagbukas, ito yung reaction niya. Pagpatay, ito yung reaction niya. So unless siguro kahit i-reduce mo yung ilaw, i-reduce mo gaya ng ganitong gamit kong ring light, pwedeng ma-reduce yung ilaw, pero still, independent pa din siya. In a study determined the effect of temperature on plant pigmentation, the independent variable or cause is the temperature, while the amount of pigment or color is the dependent variable, the effect. So, sa madaling sabi, pag maramasabing independent variable, siya yung basis ng effect. So halimbawa, the effects of bullying in the effects of cyberbullying in academic performance of selected grade 12 students. So ako may gumawa ng title. So yung independent variable doon, alin kaya? O ano muna yung mga variable? So yung variable doon na una ay yung bullying. At yung pangalawa doon ay academic performance. So alin kaya doon yung independent? Siyempre ang independent doon ay yung bullying. Kasi yung bullying hindi siya nagbabago pero yung ang naapektuhan niya yung academic performance. Naka pa natin. So yung presence ng bullying, siya yung nakaka-apekto dun sa academic performance. So meaning, yung bullying, siya yung may tuturing nating independent at yung sumunod naman ay dependent variable. Ano yung sabihin ng dependent variable? Dependent variables are those that depend on the independent variables. They are the outcomes or results of, or of the influence or of the independent variable. Kagaya nung sinabi ko kanina, um, bullying, tapos academic performance. So you are bullied, once you are bullied frequently, it will create some effect in your studies. Pag less bullied ka, maaring maapektuhan din yung study mo. So although nag-i-increase yung bullying, pero yung pag-increase niya yung gumagawa ng effect dun sa sumunod na variable. Naka niyo po. So kung magiging constant yung bullying, meron din siyang effect dun sa sumunod na variable. So yun yung ibig sabihin ng independent. Pero kung halimbawa, balik rin natin, kahit sipagan mo ng pag-aaral, hindi niya mababawasan yung bullying. Kahit hindi ka mag-aral, hindi niya rin mababawasan yung bullying. So yun yung kaibahan ng dependent at independent. Independent cannot affect the independent. Halimbawa yung age, sinabi to sa example kanina, yung person's age independent tapos yung watching television ay dependent. So hindi mo siya pwedeng pagbaliktarin kasi pag sinabing dependent, yung results niya nakadepende dun sa galaw ng independent. Halimbawa, baliktarin natin, gawin natin independent yung watching TV. So, the more you frequent you watch, the more age you get. Ganun ba yun? So, hindi naman, di ba? Or the lesser you watch, the lesser age you get. Hindi naman din ganun. So, the age is constant, pareho lang siya. Halimbawa, your age is 10. Tapos ikaw ay frequent TV watcher. So kahit hindi ka maging frequent TV watcher, 10 years old ka pa din. So hindi siya nagbabago. So tingnan natin ito sa example. A test score could be dependent variable because it could change depending on the several factors such as how much you studied, how much sleep you got, then the night before you took the test, or even how hungry you were when you took it. Usually, when you're looking at the relationship between two things, you are trying to find out what makes dependent variable change the way it does. So, ito lang talaga yung gusto kong tignan ninyong mabuti. Kasi itong intervening minsan mahirap tong idagdag kasi ito yung pangatlong variable na tinitignan natin sa ating study. So pag tatlo yung variable, mas magiging mahirap na siya i-compute. So, pero pag-aralan pa natin, intervening or mediating variables. Intervening and mediating variables stand between independent and dependent variables. They show effects on the independent variable on the dependent variable. An intervening variable is a hypothetical variable used to explain causal links between other variables. Intervening variables cannot be observed in an experiment. That's why they are hypothetical. For example, there is an association between poor and having shorter lifespan. Because someone is poor doesn't mean that will lead to early death. So other hypothetical variables are used to explain the phenomenon. These intervening variables include lack of access to healthcare or poor nutrition. So medyo masakit sa ulo to kapag idinagdag nyo to sa research ninyo. For example, um, ang inyong study is about bullying and academic performance. So, madaling alamin yung relationship ng academic and bullying. Kasi dalawa lang sila. Pero kung titignan mo pa yung intervening factors, gaya nung sinabi dito na hypothetical hypothetical factors, bakit siya nangyari, o ano yung mga maliliit na factors sa loob na nakaka-apekto. Bawa, sa bullying at home, bullying at school, aanihin mo pa yung iba pang mga factors. So that will create another study within the study. So, kumbaga, instead na gagamitin lang natin a Pearson product at t-test, baka gumamit tayo ng chi-square at iba pa. So I'm not recommending you to to include this intervening mediating variables. But at least we know kung ano itong mga ano na to, itong mga variable na to. For control variables. Control variables are special type of independent variables that are measured in a study because they potentially influence the dependent variable. You use the statistical procedure analysis of variance to control this variable. They may be a demographic or personal variables that need to be controlled. So that the true influence of independent variable on the dependent variable can be determined. Example, ito yung sinabi ko kanina, yung ito yung sinabi ko kanina, example yung independent variable sa nauna ay yung light. So yung light, pwede mo siyang baguhin. Pwede mo siyang baguhin. Although sabi nga natin independent variable yung light, kasi kahit naman mamatay yung halaman, hindi naman mamamatay yung liwanag or kahit hindi mag-react yung moth, hindi naman nakaka-apekto yun sa klase ng liwanag. Pero minsan yung amount din ng liwanag can be a factor para magkaroon ng significant response yung dependent, no, yung moth. So, ito yung tinatawag nating control variable. So, yung independent variable mo na sabi nga natin unchangeable, binibigyan mo siya ng circumstances, binibigyan mo siya ng ano ba mas magandang term? Binibigyan mo siya ng conditions. Diba? As you change the independent variable, you watch what happens to the dependent variable in case you see how much plant grow. So, yun. Pwede din naman constant yung independent variable, pero mas maganda kung yung independent variable ay control. Ibig sabihin, mayroon kayong changes na ginagawa para mas makita mo yung results. So, pwede siya maging manipulated. For a while lang. Ulit. Yan. So, tuloy tayo. So, confounding variable. The last kind of variable in this lesson is the confounding variable. So, confounding variables are those that are not actually measured or observed in the study. They exist, but their influence cannot directly detected in a study. So, researchers like you comment on the influence of confounding variables after the study has been completed, because this variable may have operated to explain the relationship between the independent variables, but they were not or could not be easily assessed. So itong mga ano to, confounding variables, hindi talaga to lumalabas sa chapter 4. Madalas lumalabas na to dun sa ano sa ano tawag dito? Maaring sa conclusion or sa ano tawag dito sa ano ba yung last part, sorry. Recommendations. So, maring hindi ito directly lumabas dun sa study, pero naobserbahan ng researcher na bagaman wala siyang directly effect dun sa study, pero naobserbahan siyang present dun sa loob ng study. So, pwede mo siyang i-recommend. So, napakahalaga nitong dalawang ito, yung independent at dependent variable, para mabuo ninyo yung inyong research title. So, hindi pala dito naka-example yung research title. So, pwede nyo pong sagutin itong mga activities na ito sa chapter 3 para mas maintindihan nyo po yung mga variables na ito. So, proceed tayo dun sa module 5. So, ngayon, alam na natin yung mga variables, pwede na tayong mag-start mag-formulate ng research title. So proceed tayo sa research title. So ito, katulad lang ito nung pinagawa ko sa inyo, itong funnel of ideas. Um, kung naalala ninyo, yung pinasend ko sa inyo last time, sinabi ko sa inyo, mag-isip kayo ng topic, tapos gumawa kayo ng problem na gusto nyong pag-usapan, then how will you solve this problem na to, and your expected outcome. Yung expected outcome, yung magiging topic ng research ninyo sana. But as I observe, medyo siguro yung iba may hangover pa dun sa qualitative, naging qualitative yung ibang study. Although may mga ilan ako nabasa na promising yung topic, nag-comment ako na I hope I will see this as a research, as your research title or as your formal research. So, may mga, although hindi pa ako tapos sa pag-check, so expect makaka-receive kayo ng individual feedbacks doon sa inyong pinasa, then maybe you can consider it para sa ipagbuo ninyo ng title. So, nagsisimula yung pagbuo ng title sa team. Halimbawa, sige, forward na natin dito. Balik tayo pala dito. Nagsisimula yung pagbuo ng title sa team. Example, mahilig ako sa math or mahilig ako sa social issues. So, yun yung team. So, ano yung, mula doon sa mas malaking team, bubuo ka ng general interest. Ano yung interest mo doon sa social issues? For example, ang hilig ko doon sa social issues ay more on education. Tapos, isip ka na ng topic mo. Halimbawa, anong topic mo doon sa education na may kinalaman sa social issues? Maano mong pag-usapan yung um, new normal situation ng ating education. So, yun na yung broad topic mo. So, kung napapansin ninyo, mula dun sa malaking concept, paliit ng paliit, hanggang sa mapunta ka na ngayon dun sa research problem. So, ngayon, kung ang problem mo ay yung new normal education, yung normal phase of education na binigay ko sa inyong example dito, buksan natin. Medyo mabagal lang yung internet. Binigay ko sa inyong example. Saan yung example na yun? Yun. Dito sa activity number 1, yan. Bawa, ito yung sasabihin nating sasabihin nating broad topic, ito na yon. Yan, yung students' performance in new normal phase of education. So, ang aking problem ay what are the modes of learning in the new normal phase of education? What are the students' performance from October to December 2020 on practical research? So, nagkaroon ako ng specific subject. Is there a relationship between modes of learning and students' performance? So, yun na yung mga problem ko. Then, bubuo na ako ng title. So, kung bubuuin ko siyang title, ano kaya yung pwede kong gamitin? Oops, mali ako napuntahan. So, kung bubuuin ko siyang title, ito na yung title ko. Relationship between modes of learning in new normal phase of education in students' performance in practical research 2. Example. So, yon. Yun na yung title ko. So, kung mapapansin ninyo, ganun lang siya kadaling buuin. At nandun din yung presence backup ng inyong independent at saka dependent variable. So, isuriin natin yung ginawa ko. So, mula dun sa nabuo kong problem, so how can I answer? Saka na natin pag-usapan yan. Kasi, ano yan chapter 3. So, relationship between modes of learning in new normal phase of education in students' performance in practical research 2. Example. So, alin dito yung matatawag nating dependent saka independent variable. So, syempre, ang nagbabago lang dito talaga ay yung students' performance. So, meaning, ang students' performance ang dependent at yung modes of learning ang independent. So, pag nagbago yung modes of learning, magbabago yung, pwedeng magbago yung student's performance. Pero hindi yung student's performance, hindi niya kayang baguhin yung modes of learning. So yun po yung mga independent at dependent variables. So sa step 1, sabi ni Creswell 2014, para mabuo ninyo yung title ninyo, kailangan alamin nyo muna kung ano yung independent variable at dependent variable ng inyong research. So kung halimbawa, ayokong mag-cite ng example sa mga gawa ninyo. Halimbawa, um, gusto nyo malaman yung relationship ng ng English proficiency sa mathematical ability. Pero ina-advise ko wag niyo nang gawin to kasi last year nagawa na to. Tsaka wala kayong chance para makuha yung data nito. So wag niyo nang gawin. Pero just for an example, yun ang gamitin natin, yung English proficiency, relationship of English proficiency to mathematical ability of selected grade 11 students of Jesus de la Peña National High School, school year 2020-2021. Example lang. So, ano yung gusto kong maging independent variable? Halimbawa, gusto kong malaman yung kung may kinalaman yung English proficiency sa mathematical ability. So, ang ating independent variable ay English proficiency. Yung ating independent variable ay mathematical ability. Bakit? Kasi hindi ka sa teorya mo, gaganda yung grade ng isang bata kapag magaling siya mag-English. So meaning, ang nakakaapekto ay yung English proficiency sa mathematical ability. So, ano lang yun, teorya mo pa lang yun. Kailangan may ganun kang mga factors, yung independent at dependent para mabuo mo yung title. Then, assess the impact of these variables in an outcome. So, sa tingin mo ba, may chance ba na magawa mo itong title na ito? So, assess mo. Then, test theories or broad explanation. So, maghanap ka po ng mga related studies. So, simulan na ninyo maghanap ng related studies. May chance ba kayong magawa ito? Meron ba kayong mapagkukunan ng related studies? Especially ba, ngayon ang pinagawa kong topic, puro related sa new normal situation natin. Sa tingin niyo ba kung gagawin niyo yung top title na ipinasa niyo sa akin o yung mga pinasa niyo sa akin na sa activity 1, sa tingin niyo ba makakaya niyo pa siyang gawin at matapos ngayong semester? At pang-apat, apply results to a large number of people. So ito sa na to kasi chapter 3. So ito, bigyan natin sa example. So measure variables. So sa kanila, ang independent variable ay perception of jeepney drivers or commuters. Dependent variable, Jeepney Modernization Act. So assessing the impact of these variables in an outcome. So difference in perception of jeepney drivers and commuters. Parang I think baliktad dito. The test theories or broad explanation. No significant difference in the perception of both jeepney drivers and commuters in um, Jeepney Modernization Act. So ano to, significant difference. Apply results to a large number of people. The population carries the number of people including drivers and commuters. In addition, the results will be disseminated to the stakeholders involved in the study. So ang nabuo ng title ay The Perceptions of Marikina Jeepney Drivers and Commuters in the Proposed Jeepney Modernization Act. Kasi proposed pa lang. So meaning, kaya siya naging dependent variable, so tama pala ito, kaya siya naging dependent variable um, yung proposed Jeepney Modernization Act kasi susunod yung magiging results ng study ay magiging basis for Jeepney Modernization Act. So ito pa yung ilang examples ng quantitative research. Perception of general academic strand students of Tanyong High School in using English language as medium of instruction and communication in specialized courses. So alin kaya dito yung independent tsaka dependent. Alin kaya dito yung so ito kasi ang tawag dito sa research na to ay descriptive. So meaning dinedescribe lang ng study kung data. So hindi siya nagpapakita ng inferential results gaya ng relationships or difference. So ano lang to, nagpapakita lang siya ng picture kung ano yung perception ng mga estudyante. So tingnan natin, yung independent variable dito ay yung perception of general academic strand. Tapos ang dependent ay yung English language as a medium of instruction and communication in specialized courses. So bakit? Kasi yung perception ay gagamitin as basis para dun sa subject. Pero kung ang magiging kasi puro perception to, ang inaasahan ko ay relationship. Evaluation of Barangay Malanday Disaster Risk Reduction Management Council in response to the needs of the community during disaster. Evaluative research. So, in response to the needs of the community. So alin kaya dito ang dependent saka independent. So ang independent dito ay yung response ng ng mga respondents. Although hindi pinakita dito yung perception, pero yung response ng mga respondents, sila yung independent kasi sila yung makakaapekto dun sa Barangay Malanday Disaster Risk Reduction Management Council. So may pwedeng kapag through their responses, magiging paraan to para mapaganda yung system o ma-improve yung system. Medyo nabigla lang akong puro perception pala to. Pero most likely, ang gagawin natin, mas mataas dito kasi masyadong madali ito. Ang gagawin natin more on relationships, more on um, more on relationships and comparative research, comparing two variables. So ngayon, as an activity, mag-usap po kayo as a group. So kayo nang bahala kung gusto nyo mag-usap through Messenger, gumamit kayo ng Google Meet, basta mag-usap kayo. Then, try to trim down your ideas. Diba, gumawa kayo ng activity 1 as individual. Now, share your ideas. Kung naibalik ko na yung individual feedback ko sa inyo, you can share my feedback. Kung wala pa, you can just share your output para lang mabasa ninyo. Then decide alin doon sa mga gawa ninyo yung gagamitin ninyo. Or pwede din namang scrap nyo lahat ng gawa nyo dahil, example, lahat kayo malayo yung gawa dun sa ina-expect ko. So, isip na lang kayo ng bago. Basta, ang magiging title natin is more of a relationship. Dapat pagkukumpara o pagtingin ng ugnayan ng dalawang bagay. The relationship of independent and dependent variable. So para mas magkaroon ng lalim yung ating study. So babalik ko ulit. Ito yung mas gusto kong gamitin itong gawa ko as an example. So relationship between modes of learning and new normal phase of education and students' performance. So ang independent dito ay yung modes of learning. Kasi yung modes of learning, hindi siya nagbabago. Although pag binago siya, example, modular, ginawa kong online, anong effect sa student? So yung student yung nakaka-experience ng effect. So meaning, yung student yung dependent. Independent yung mode of learning. So gusto ko malaman ng inyong research title. Ito pala. So, gagawin po ninyo yun as a group. So, isang output lang po for a group. So, maglalagay po ako ng deadline kung kailan ninyo ipapasa. Pwede nyo gawin sa papel. At dapat sa dulo nito, nakalagay na yung nakalagay na dito yung inyong research title at yung inyong research problem. So yung research problem, dapat related siya dun sa variable. So meaning, isang problem ay isang variable, isang problem. Halimbawa, tingnan natin. Ang aking variables ay modes of learning tsaka students' performance. So ang aking first problem about modes of learning, yung pangalawang problem about students' performance. Yung pangatlong problem is about relationship. Kasi yun yung gusto kong tignan sa dalawa. So, ganun din yung gusto kong maging pattern natin para mas maging madali yung ating usapan. So, dapat nandito sa narrow topic or research problem, so at least three problems. Yung una, a problem about your first variable. Second is the problem about your second variable. Third will be about relationship. So, maaaring yung gayahin yung style ng pagbuo ko nung sa akin. So, pwede nyo balikan sa ating Google Classroom. So, ipopost ko po yung ating deadline sa ating activity. I think the deadline will be next meeting sa pagkikita natin. So, pagka naipasa na sa akin yung title, makaka-receive kayo ng pipilitin ko makapagbigay ng individual feedback at kung kaya natin siguro magkaroon tayo ng um, Google Meet para explain nyo sa akin bakit yan yung gusto nyong topic. Siguro per group na lang tayo mag-meet next meeting. So propose pa lang yan. Pero I will inform you the mood for our next meeting ahead of time para makapagplano tayo. So yun lang po. So I hope gagawin niyo yan as a group. At paalala ko ulit kung ano man yung maging decision ninyo dun sa sinabi ko kanina, kung gusto nyo ba ay balik tayo sa PowerPoint. Kung ang gusto nyo ba ay hindi ba ito bumalik? Click to exit. Ayaw. So kung gusto nyo ba ay modular, katulad ng nilagay ko dito, modular, o gusto nyo bang mag-research. So sa online, pwede rin kayo mag-stick sa modular kung gusto ninyo. So gusto ko malaman yung inyong sagot ngayong araw din para maisaayos natin. So I hope naintindihan niyo ating discussion for this day. Kung may questions pa po kayo, just inform me kung ano po ang pwede ko maitulong para magawa natin ito ng maayos. So have a good day and see you next meeting.